You know, in the world of modern marketing, we're told to be everywhere, all at once. To post more, shout louder, and just fill every single space with our message. But what if that's the very thing that's causing our audience to tune us out? Today, we're going to explore a totally different approach. A way to transform all that chaotic noise of digital marketing into something like a perfectly orchestrated piece of music. We're going to learn how to conduct a content symphony, turning all that dissonance into harmony and all that distraction into deep, focused attention.
Just let that sink in for a second. This isn't about how hard your team is working, or even the quality of what you're putting out there. It's a diagnosis of the environment we're all swimming in. Think about it. The modern consumer sees thousands of brand messages a day, and their brains, as a survival mechanism, have gotten incredibly good at building walls, filtering out anything that feels inconsistent or overwhelming. So when we're shouting from a dozen different platforms with a dozen slightly different voices, we're not just being ignored. We're actively being flagged and filtered out as untrustworthy noise. The problem isn't the volume, it's the lack of a clear, single melody.
And yeah, this problem has a name: content cacophony. It's that jarring feeling a customer gets when your hilarious meme-filled TikTok feels like it was made by a completely different company than your super serious data-heavy LinkedIn posts. And your email newsletter? That's like a third personality altogether. This isn't just a simple branding mistake. On a deep, subconscious level, this kind of inconsistency, it signals instability. It tells the human brain, hey, this thing doesn't have a solid core. I can't really trust it. It's basically the digital version of meeting someone who completely changes their personality depending on who they're talking to. You instinctively pull back. Okay, so here's our roadmap for this explainer. First, we're going to start with the diagnosis, really understanding the noise that's holding so many brands back. Then we'll look at the origin story of this whole idea. It was a survival plan, really, born from chaos. After that, we'll get into the engine itself, your symphonic core. Then we'll dive into the human code, the psychology of why this all works so well. From there, it's the conductor's guide, a practical plan to build your own. And we'll wrap it all up with a final big idea that kind of reframes marketing itself.
All right, let's start with the diagnosis. For the better part of a decade, the main philosophy in marketing has been this relentless chase for more. More. The thinking was that growth was a simple equation. More content, on more platforms, more often, equals more customers. We were told to chase every shiny new platform, to feed every algorithm, to just become these content machines. But all that led to was burnout, inconsistency, and a tidal wave of just okay content that has totally changed how audiences behave. The game isn't about who can shout the loudest anymore, it's about who can create the clearest, most compelling signal in all that noise.
And this right here, this captures the huge shift perfectly. The old way was all about what we can call the volume illusion. It was a numbers game, pure and simple, built on the idea that more posts would magically equal more growth. The goal was just to be everywhere, and if the message got a little messy or inconsistent along the way, that was fine. But here's what that approach missed: human evolution. Our brains, to survive this information firehose, have become masters at sniffing out and filtering incoherence. Which brings us to the new way, narrative harmony. Here, the goal isn't just to be everywhere, it's to be whole wherever you show up. Coherence is the new currency for trust. Incoherence is no longer just tolerated, it's actively rejected by your audience's brain.
So where did this whole idea even come from? It's really important to get that the Content Symphony wasn't some clever theory cooked up in a boardroom. It was a survival strategy. It was forged in the fire of a marketing world that was just breaking. It came from the chaos when brands realized their massive content engines were sputtering, and their connection with their audience was just falling apart no matter how much money they threw at it.
This timeline tells the whole story. It really kicked off in the mid-2020s when that promise of omnichannel marketing went sour, became more like messy channel. Every social platform's algorithm became its own little tyrant, forcing brands to twist their personalities just to get some reach. He had to be a comedian on TikTok, a professor on LinkedIn, a visual artist on Instagram. And the data that followed was, well, it was alarming. Brand affinity, that deep loyalty, it started to crater. People couldn't find a consistent scent to follow, a reliable personality to latch onto. This sparked a revolution. The smartest marketers stopped caring about vanity metrics like views and likes. They started tracking something totally new: contextual migration. Basically, how well can you guide someone's attention from one piece of content, like a short video, to another, like a deep article? And that brings us to today, where we understand that true narrative coherence, that's the ultimate advantage, because it's the one thing that algorithms and AI just can't fake.
And this quote, this just cuts right to the heart of it. We, as marketers, we see separate channels. We have our LinkedIn strategy, our Instagram grid, our podcast schedule, but our audience, They don't see any of that. They don't experience us in these neat little boxes. They experience one single thing, the total vibration of our brand. Is it a clear, resonant sound, or is it a jarring, dissonant mess? They're not buying from your channel, they're buying into a feeling, a frequency.
Okay, so if the goal is to create that perfect vibration, how in the world do we actually do it? This brings us to the engine at the heart of the system. And this isn't just some vague philosophy, it's a very specific engineered framework. It's an integrated narrative architecture designed to systematically create coherence. We're moving from the theory to the mechanics. Let's look at how the symphony is actually built.
The formal name for this is the Symphonic Content Engine. The big idea here is to stop thinking of your marketing channels as just a random pile of tactics. Instead, I want you to see your entire media presence as a 4-section orchestra. In this model, every platform, every single piece of content, it's no longer a solo performance. It becomes an instrument with a specific role playing a coordinated part in one single unified piece of music, your core brand story.
Let's break down this orchestra section by section. First up, we have the percussion. This section is all your most attention-grabbing stuff, your short-form videos, your reels, your TikToks, your social ads. Now, the job of the percussion section is not to tell the whole story. That is so important to understand. Its mission is simple and primal. Provide the pulse, stop the scroll, grab attention in a split second, and set the tempo for everything else. It's that sharp, irresistible beat that makes someone pause in their endless feed and lean in, ready to hear what's next.
Okay, once the percussion has their attention, we bring in the Woodwinds. This section is your text-based social media platforms like LinkedIn or X. The Woodwinds provide the intellectual melody. So if the percussion was the visceral what, the Woodwinds are the logical why. This is where you build nuanced authority, where you offer insights and frameworks that show your deep expertise. It's the layer of logic that gives real substance to that initial primal beat. The reel grabbed them, the LinkedIn post is what makes them think, oh wow, this person actually knows their stuff.
Section 3 is the strings, and this is where the real magic happens. This section is made up of your owned channels, the platforms where you have a direct line to your audience, away from the chaos of algorithms. Think about your email list, your private community, that kind of thing. The mission here is to create real emotional intimacy. If the woodwinds are the brain, the strings are the soul. This is the place for storytelling, for sharing vulnerabilities, for celebrating wins together. Here, you're not just an authority, you're building a genuine human connection. This is the warm, resonant, emotional heart of your brand's symphony.
And finally, anchoring the whole orchestra, we have Section 4, the brass. These are your heavy hitters, your foundational content. This is your long-form stuff like podcasts, webinars, deep dive articles, and detailed case studies. So after the percussion grabs attention, the woodwinds build logic, and the strings create emotion, the brass section comes in to deliver structural power and closing weight. It is the undeniable proof. It's the deep dive that solidifies your authority beyond any doubt and gives your audience that final, powerful reason to believe and to act. It's the solid foundation the whole symphony is built on.
So here's the thing. It isn't just about having these 4 sections. It's about how they seamlessly connect. The dynamic that powers this whole engine is called narrative migration. This replaces the old passive model of just hoping people find your other stuff. Instead, we're talking about the strategic and intentional design of a journey from one instrument to the next. For instance, a person sees a reel, that's the percussion, that has an interesting idea. At the end of that reel, a clear call to action points them to a LinkedIn post, the Woodwinds, that unpacks the logic. At the end of that post, an invitation guides them to your newsletter, The Strings, where you share the personal story behind the whole thing. See? It's a deliberate, guided path, not a random maze. And with every step, their immersion in your world gets deeper and their trust gets stronger.
This new approach means we need a completely new way of measuring success. The old system was obsessed with these shallow, top-of-funnel metrics, views, impressions, reach. The ultimate goal was to go viral, a huge spike of attention that was usually fleeting and almost never turned into real business. The symphonic system measures something way more meaningful: migration velocity. This asks a totally different question. Not how many people saw this, but of the people who saw it, what percentage took the next step in the story, and how fast did they do it? This tells you not just if your content is popular, but if it's effective. It measures the depth of engagement, not just surface-level attention. We're shifting our goal from chasing virality to engineering resonance.
So we've covered the what and the how. Now, let's talk about the why. Why is this symphonic approach so ridiculously powerful? The answer isn't in some marketing trend. It's in the deep, fundamental principles of human psychology.
I mean, that's the essential question, isn't it? We can build the most elegant system in the world, but if it doesn't connect with how people actually think and feel, it's completely useless. So let's look under the hood at the human brain for a second. The first principle is a classic from social psychology called the mere exposure effect. The science is actually really simple. Our brains are literally hardwired to prefer and trust things that are familiar to us. Think about it from an evolutionary perspective. Familiar things were safe. Unfamiliar things could be a threat. Now, the old, chaotic way of marketing was constantly presenting this unfamiliar, shape-shifting brand. But a symphonic brand uses this principle perfectly. It creates this deep familiarity through consistency. When the theme in your short video, the percussion, perfectly matches the logic in your post, the woodwinds, and the emotion in your newsletter, the strings, your audience's brain doesn't just see a brand, it recognizes a familiar, reliable, and therefore trustworthy friend.
The second powerful principle is the law of closure. This comes from Gestalt psychology. Our brains are basically pattern-matching machines, and they absolutely hate an open loop or an unfinished melody. They have this intense, innate desire for completion. The Content Symphony is engineered to tap right into that craving. The percussion section, your reel, it introduces a compelling musical idea, but it doesn't resolve it. It opens a loop. The woodwinds might add another layer, deepening the mystery. And the brain, now feeling this unresolved tension, feels this powerful subconscious pull to find the resolution, which drives them to the strings section, your newsletter, where that final satisfying chord is played and the story feels complete. You're not just pushing content anymore, you're composing a psychological pull.
Okay, so this all sounds amazing in theory, but how do you actually build it? Let's switch gears from understanding the symphony to becoming the conductor. This is the practical, actionable part.
There are 3 core steps to becoming a content conductor. First, you've got to audit your acoustics. That means finding your core sound. Second, you assign the instrumental roles to all your platforms. And third, you consciously engineer the migration paths between them. Let's make this super concrete. Step 1 is to audit your acoustics. This is the foundation. Before you can conduct a symphony, you have to know what your core note is. This means asking a really deep question. If our brand had to be boiled down to a single theme, a single idea, what would it be? This isn't about your products, it's about your core belief. So, for our example, let's say your master theme is calculated power. Now we go to step 2, assign instrumental roles. With that master theme as your guide, you now give each platform a specific job. Instagram Reels is your percussion. Its mission, stop the scroll by expressing calculated power in a visceral, punchy way. LinkedIn becomes your woodwind. Its mission, explain the logic behind calculated power with smart, nuanced articles. Your newsletter is the strings, and its mission is to share the human stories that show the emotional impact of that power. And that brings us to the crucial third step, engineering the migration path. This means you don't just post. You create a reel about a specific result from calculated power, and you end it by saying, I break down the exact framework I used in my latest LinkedIn article, link in my bio. Then, in that article, you end with, to see how this framework changed a client's life, make sure you're on my newsletter where I'm sharing her story this week. You see, each piece doesn't just repeat the theme, it creates the pathway to the next. All of these mechanics, the engine, the migration paths, the roles, they're all in service of one final, really profound idea. This is the core insight, the philosophical shift that makes this whole thing work. It's about fundamentally changing our relationship with our audience and the very nature of growth itself.
For decades, the main metaphor in marketing has been the funnel. And it's an aggressive, forceful image, isn't it? It implies that we are cramming people in the top and squeezing them out the bottom. It's a push. The symphonic model replaces this old industrial age concept with something far more natural and way more powerful. You're not pushing anyone. Instead, you're creating a magnetic force. You're composing a story so coherent, a signal so clear, and a vibration so resonant that it creates a natural pull, drawing the right people towards the value you have. They move through your story not because they're being forced down some path, but because they're captivated by the music and they genuinely want to hear the next note. Growth isn't a straight line you force people down, it's a bridge of harmony you build over a canyon of noise. When you stop just creating content and you start conducting your symphony, you move from a world of pushing to a world of pulling. Because the best marketing doesn't push people through a funnel, it pulls them toward value. And that changes everything.